I'm Bob Schwartz. I served in the United States Air Force from August 1998 to April 2012.
What inspired you to join the Air Force?
When I was growing up as a kid, I watched a lot of cartoons, so like G.I. Joe and Transformers and those type of shows. And a lot of the cartoons at the time espoused ideas of like service, honor, sacrifice, duty, and those kind of personality traits and morals, if you will, were something that resonated with me from the time when I was a little kid all the way up to graduating high school. And because of those character traits that I appreciated and that I had made part of my life, the military just seemed a really obvious choice to ensure that I could actually live out those morals.
During your time with the Air Force, where were you stationed?
I started out with training at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas for basic training and also security forces training, which was my job in the Air Force, which is essentially a light infantry, nuclear security, and law enforcement element. After that, my first duty station was Minot, North Dakota, where I served for about 20 months. Then I did 2 years at Kunsan Air Base, Republic of Korea, South Korea. Then went back to Minot for another 6.5 years. Then went back to Kunsan for another year, and then I finished out my career with 2 years at Aviano Air Base, Italy. During the time in between, I was also deployed to Karshi-Khanabad, Uzbekistan, Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, and Balad Air Base, Iraq.
What was your favorite place to be stationed?
Probably Korea. The duty station I was there at Kunsan was unaccompanied tour, means there's no families or anything there, so everybody is military. So you create much stronger relationships with the people you're there with because you work together. As soon as you get off work, you hang out together, you eat together, you're with each other almost nonstop. And then the relationships and the camaraderie you can build with your brothers and sisters in arms is significant. It's actually one of the reasons, or excuse me, the main reason I moved here to Iowa. A guy I consider to be my brother was somebody I met my second tour in Korea. We became very good friends, and then eventually, once we both got out, we stayed in contact, and eventually I moved down here to be closer to him and his daughters.
During your time overseas or stationed anywhere really, was there any moments that were particularly stressful to you?
Yeah, I mean, the military it's a stressful way of life, especially post 9/11, with the military operations in Afghanistan and the area, and then also Iraq. So in deployed environments, stress is just part of life to the point where you really don't feel it anymore because it's just what life is. And then even day to day, when you're at home station, when you're not deployed, there's still a significant amount of stress that's put on individuals there. What's called the ops tempo, or the rate at which we engage in either inspections or other duties outside of like our day-to-day stuff, is pretty high. So everybody felt the stress of just day-to-day life in the military. So.
Sorry to backtrack, but
Sure.
Back to your training.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, Air Force basic training is pretty easy, especially when you compare it to the rest of the other branches. I think at the time it was only like 6.5 weeks, so not very much. After that, when I went to my tech school, where I actually learned my duties, that was a lot of fun, actually. It was rigorous, to be sure, but just learning how to do the job was very cool. Yeah, like just actually learning the culture of the military as well. I did appreciate that. But even in my training after my initial training, because the military lifestyle is one of training constantly. Like you're doing your job and you're training doing that, or you're training to do some other type of activity. But even additional trainings I had, so trainings before I went on deployments or specialized training in my job, was always fun. Like it was a blast all the time.
How did that training, or really anything that you did with the service, affect your career later in life?
That's a good one. So as I went through my career and accelerated in rank and responsibility, one of the things I really loved about the job in general was teaching young airmen cool stuff, whether that be just general knowledge. Because when you're a supervisor in the military, your subordinates, you're pretty much like their parent as they're growing up in the ranks, because since everybody comes from all across the country, they have a varying level of knowledge and about life in general. So sometimes you have to help them out with that. Anything from medical issues or financial planning. So as an NCO in the military, you really do have to know quite a bit of stuff to help your airmen out, just to be better people. In addition to that, I really like teaching young airmen cool stuff about the job, and ensuring that they had an appreciation for not only the technical skills required to actually accomplish our mission as the police, but then also the idea of the profession at arms, so that just the generalized information about being in the military and that lifestyle. I also wanted to make sure that when they deployed, because it was going to happen, that they would also be proficient in the skills that were going to be required to keep them and their comrades alive downrange. Because of that, and also because as a law enforcement officer, I was tired of that part of my job, but the training people was awesome. So it seemed a really good fit from when I left the military and used my GI Bill to become a teacher. And it still is the best part of my gig now, is just teaching young people cool stuff. It just so happens that the things that I like to learn about just for my own personal knowledge and enjoyment are like history and civics and political science. So that's the field I went into as far as subject matter for teaching. So they really just pay me now to show up to a place and have fun all day, which is pretty great.
Were there any stories or like events that impacted you personally during your time with the service?
Most definitely. I mean, it's a pretty unique way of life. So just every day in and of itself, whether you know it or not, is giving you something that's going to impact your life. But I will definitely say the relationships I built over that time and meeting different people from different places definitely gave me a greater appreciation for people in general. And then, the friendships I made definitely had a positive impact on my life. And then also, like, being in the military gives you a sense of purpose constantly. Like, every day you're doing something that matters. Even if it seems mundane and ridiculous at the time, the idea is that it supports a greater mission. So having that idea definitely is something that impacts your life overall, and especially when you get out. A lot of vets do try to find that sense of purpose again, to make sure their lives have value and meaning. And I'm no different.
During your time in the Air Force, did you meet anybody that impacted you?
Yeah. As for supervisors in general, when we think about the military, I think like a lot of pop culture, and I think it's accurate, is the idea that military is a group of leaders, because that is an essential part of the overall culture of the military. And I did meet a significant amount of leaders that I took a lot from, whether that be good or bad. I encountered some of the most amazing leaders that anybody will ever encounter, and I was lucky to do that. And I also met some that were less so. And I still consider myself lucky to have met them, because it gave me an idea of like the type of leader I did not want to be in certain cases, which then drove me to be a better leader in general. So outside of like supervision and like the military aspect of it, just the relationships you build with people, both at work and then off duty, are significantly deepened by your shared experiences in the military. I think everybody has either heard somebody or at least seen it on TV, the idea that, somebody has an army buddy that years after, they meet up with just randomly, and it's like they never, haven't seen each other in 20 years, but it's like no time has been passed at all. So having met those kind of people while I was in was also pretty significant, definitely left a lasting mark on my life.
After serving so long in the service, how did you feel when you finally came home?
Initially, it was kind of rough. So again, like that idea, that sense of purpose, you know, when you get out, it's harder to find that immediately. But once I started college, like that assisted me because I had this overall sense of purpose that I need to be a teacher. And I take that responsibility, you know, greatly, even when I was going to college for it. Like the idea was the knowledge and experience that I would garner in college would directly relate to the impact I could leave on students. So I took my education very seriously in that aspect. So that gave me a sense of purpose. And then once I went into teaching right afterward, that also continued that sense of purpose and that idea of having a mission. Summers, however, since I've been teaching, are a little more difficult. Right after my rookie year of teaching, I started working on my master's, which I did mostly during the summer, so that kind of gave that 3 months in the middle there a little bit of structure and mission. But the more downtime I would have at length during the summer, like, it started to really affect my mental health of not having something active to do. Like that stagnation was not something I really liked, because it felt as though I was doing nothing of note. So it drove me to seek out more volunteer opportunities and things to be able to give back to my community. Again, giving that sense of purpose, but then also going, you know, back to the original question about why I joined the military, that idea of duty and service. So it's driven me to do some other things outside of my occupation now to still give back. But it took me a while to find that. But luckily, I've worked with some veteran service organizations, things like that, and other vets to try to help me get better at that, and then also help them as well.
It's pretty clear that your time in the service has impacted you. So would you recommend joining the military to any of your high school students?
I definitely would. I do not recommend it to all high school students. The military is a special way of life. And I believe that to be successful at it, you have to have a baseline of certain character traits to make you successful. And I don't think everybody has that. And that's not a check against their character, it's just that it fits certain people's lives better. So while I do think the military is exceptionally beneficial, it is definitely not for everybody. So I would recommend it to students on a case-by-case basis.
Before we finish up, was there any other stories or events that you would like to share with us?
Yeah. So that idea of supervision and learning from your supervisors, things like that. There was one, not really a story, but just a cool piece of advice that I was given by one of my supervisors. Him and I were talking about different people we had experienced in the military. That this very famous general in the Air Force, Robin Olds, who called me firsters, where they seek personal recognition not for the betterment of the mission, but just so they can receive accolades and things like that. And they put themselves before the mission. So I was talking to this guy about this, and he said, if you want to exemplify yourself, do it through knowledge, experience, and adventure. And the idea is, if you seek those things out, not for recognition, but just for personal improvement, then it's going to be recognized by people to be real, rather than people that are just seeking attention. So I took that piece of advice to heart, and I have carried that forward, and I have passed it on to my students. But in relation to giving any stories or anything like that from military that were impactful, I think that would be important to share at this time.